Life is measured in achievement, not in years alone. This idea that it's not the time that you're given, but the impact that you make that counts. I love that quote, and it's of course from Bruce McLaren, New Zealander, Kiwi, racer, and now all-around car world legend. But that ability to make an impact was stacked against Bruce from day one. At a young age, he was diagnosed with a disease that meant that his hips didn't develop properly and he had one leg shorter than the other. Like any good father, his father, Les McLaren, wanted to help him and his morale, so he built him a little go-kart, soapbox type thing to keep him mobile. So he's been on wheels from a very young age. But they also, I think, had a great bond because in their spare time together, they would repair and fix cars. The most famous one is this one that's been standing next to me, the Austin 7. And this car, Bruce finished the work on with his father at the tender age of 14, and later on would be the first car that he raced professionally, replacing his father on the day of the race. And he actually won in his series with that car as well. And that was the first impact that he made. And it was that impact and that first bit of momentum and forward acceleration that hasn't stopped till this day for McLaren. Shortly after this, Bruce won a Driver to Europe scholarship and joined Cooper Car Company in England in their racing team, began racing Formula 2 and Formula 1, and became the youngest Formula 1 race winner at just 22 years old back then. But even though Bruce was a great racer, that's not what made him stand out eventually. It was his engineering prowess and vision and his management skills. And in his own words, it was his burning enthusiasm that 7 years later in 1963 led him to set up his own racing team at such a young age. And that racing team was of course McLaren, of his own name. But it wasn't just engineering or management. Bruce understood the power of marketing and impact as well. The papaya orange colour that's now so synonymous with McLaren, he chose it because back then on black and white televisions, certain shades would stand out more than others. So he wanted the viewers to be able to see their cars more clearly. So he understood the power of impact. And in the short years that followed, he turned McLaren from a little garage workshop essentially into a multi-discipline race team. In Formula 1, he brought them their first podiums, including the 1968 Belgian Grand Prix. And then they were racing in things like the Indianapolis 500, and they were dominating in Can-Am, where sadly then Bruce would lose his life while he was testing a Can-Am car at Goodwood. The rear came off, he wasn't even meant to be driving that day, his partner was, and he went crashing into a marshal post that was later due to be commissioned later that week. And though that is very sad, and it was at a very young age of just 32, and he already achieved so much, made so much impact, the inspiring thing to me was, a few days later, the engineers on the McLaren team, independently, all decided to come back to work, despite being told that everything was over. They said they've got a race to win in 10 days, and that's exactly what they went and did, because I think somewhere they knew that that's what Bruce would have also done. And that, to me, that attitude is the soul of McLaren, and I don't think it's left till today. We've had years of motorsport dominance, and then the introduction of the automotive side of McLaren that has seen this Super Series come to life, culminating in the car that we're reviewing today, which is of course the 750S in Spider form. So welcome to RBR and to our first review of a McLaren. And if you haven't watched the channel before, we don't just review the latest, we also like to look back and see where did it come from, what inspired it, so we can better understand it. And to understand this car, you not only have to understand the man, but also the group itself. So today, I'm going to take you through the journey of what made McLaren what it is. Then we will go through the Super Series and strip down the latest one in the 750S, understand exactly what makes it tick, before we then head out and drive it on the road. So guys, with great pleasure, I welcome the first McLaren to RBR, and that is this, the 750S Spider. So guys, today's episode of RBR is sponsored by Earpiece. These are high fidelity earplugs built for people who love motorsport, loud cars and loud music, but would prefer to keep their hearing intact. If you're constantly around loud environments like racing, motorbikes, parties and weddings, live music, then you're around dangerous noise levels, which over the years can be quite harmful to your hearing. Hearing loss is permanent but preventable, and that's where Earpiece comes in with this. their earpiece Moto Pro. The great thing is they don't muffle the sound which you actually want to hear. Instead, the high fidelity filters help just lower the volume back to safe levels so you can hear everything around you. By 2050, 2 billion people are projected to have some type of hearing loss. And the next time I'm going to work and I'm trackside, I'm definitely going to take these with me so I can safeguard my ears and still hear the engine and everything around me. Heck, next time I go to an Asian wedding, 100% I'm going to take these with me because it gets quite uncomfortably loud in those environments. So protect your ears now so you can enjoy your cars and loud music. 4 years. Use the link below and use the code REMOVE20 and you'll get 20% off. And a huge thanks to Earpiece for sponsoring today's episode and supporting the channel, and to you guys for always supporting our sponsors. Let's get back to that loud McLaren. For years after Bruce McLaren's death, McLaren's name only really lived in motorsport. F1 dominance, Senna, Prost in the MP4-4, then of course the Mercedes V10s, the West livery. You guys, a lot of you know the story. But in those years, the impact of McLaren, not just on motorsport, but on road cars, was immense. For example, 1981, the MP4-1 was the first Formula One car to bring in the carbon tub around the driver for safety. It was a wild idea at the time, with other teams saying, this is crazy, it's a flimsy material, they're just gonna die. But in this case, the proof of the pudding was in the crashing. With John Watson crashing at Monza, the car disintegrating around him, and everyone thought, right, that's the next dead F1 driver this season. And he walks away, pretty much unscathed, all things considering. And from that point on, Formula One, of course, changed forever, with carbon being there for safety, especially for safety. And then the impact, of course, on road cars. I had the opportunity to actually lift one of those tubs up myself, ridiculously light, absolutely blew my mind. But the motorsport world, really not the same again. Now, a lot of manufacturers use carbon now for weight saving or just for effect sometimes. But with McLaren, it's literally in their DNA. And as I see it, it was their gift to the rest of the car industry. Now, in the late 80s, with back-to-back F1 championships, a crazy idea was forming behind the scene. The then technical director of McLaren, Gordon Murray, went to boss Ron Dennis with an idea to make the world's greatest sports car. And he had a vision, a naturally aspirated V12, century-placed driving position, and a focus on lightweight that would then create the first proper McLaren, but for road use. And in 1992, with Ron Dennis's backing, they made it, and the McLaren F1 was released with that famed 6.1 litre BMW sourced V12, naturally aspirated thing of beauty, 627 PS, weighing just over 1100 kg only, and the first ever carbon monocoque in a road production car. In 1998, it beat the record for the fastest road car in the world. And this one I'm actually standing to is the actual one that did it. This is the XP5, finished in now legendary XP green color. Driven by Le Mans winner Andy Wallace at VW's Erlesian track, it hit 240.1 miles per hour, being the fastest production car in the world at the time. And even now, 25 years later, still the fastest naturally aspirated production car ever made. And I think that car stands for everything that McLaren is. And even though so few are made, just over 100, the impact of that car is still felt today. Fast forward to the 2000s, and McLaren was still primarily a motorsport company, though the idea of a road car was hatching again, as they were 40% owned by Mercedes. And yes, I'm of course talking about the SLR McLaren that would then be made. Now, this had an engine that was AMG source, so a 5.4 litre supercharged V8, but it was built at the MTC, the McLaren Technology Centre, and it had a carbon tub like any modern McLaren would. It had those doors, again, very similar to our modern McLarens. It had braking tech from F1, active aerodynamics, and that long, very Mercedes bonnet made it that typical GT Cruiser type look. But more than anything, this was again a sign that McLaren could make great road cars, but they needed their own brand again and their own name on that car. And in the background, Ron Dennis was working on exactly that. He didn't want a one-off like the F1 or a joint effort like the SLR. He wanted McLaren's own road-going series with engines, chassis, platform and development all happening in Woking at NTC. And he started making hires in engineering, in design. And one of those hires in 2003 was Anthony Sheriff, who would later end up becoming the managing director and the man responsible for pushing the 12C, the MP4 12C, into production. It wouldn't be until 2010 that McLaren Automotive itself was set up, and then the MP4 12C came into existence in 2011. And really, this was the car that then set the standard and the basis for the entire Super Series running forward till our car today. And the basis for the 12C, very familiar. If you know anything about the Super Series cars today, we had our first ever carbon monocell, of course, super light, super rigid. Behind that, a V8, 3.8 litre V8 in this case, and of course all the power going to the rear. But we had some innovation here as well. We had brake steer from F1. We had the incredible suspension system debuting in this car, which was the PCC, or Proactive Chassis Control System, which had hydraulically cross-mounted dampers that one reviewer said was freakishly comfortable, like on GT cruiser levels. But it still gave the car the ability to have incredible handling, enough that it made a lot of reviewers essentially orgasm on paper when writing about this car. But it was a bit dull looking, wasn't it? Outside, it never really said much about McLaren. Inside, the cabin was just okay. And the noise, again, for a V8 supercar, pretty forgettable. But all in all, a great first effort, but felt very engineer-led, kind of sterile. McLaren needed a car to sit at the top as its halo car that wasn't looking back at the F1. And that car came in 2013 in the form of the legendary P1. Using that V8, but with electrical assistance, it gave 916 PS, a crazy 600 kg of downforce was capable, and even standing still, it looked fast. But more importantly, it had unique McLaren DNA that was immediately recognizable in that design. And it was quickly hailed as one corner of the Holy Trinity of the LaFerrari and the 918. So this one, in fact, that's standing in front of me was named the Widowmaker by Top Gear, and it was that type of car. And the P1 didn't just grab headlines. It sat then at the top of McLaren as the car that it needed then, the halo car, that other cars could then derive their technological basis and their heritage from. And the next car in the Super Series did. It was the 650S, of course, and that took that face of the P1, brought it into the Super Series, not just for branding, which of course it should, but what they learnt in terms of cooling from P1. And they also brought in suspension learning into the 650S while maintaining that lovely comfort that we had in the 12C, so that wasn't lost. Power was bumped up to 650 PS, and that's why it's called the 650. So from then on, naming convention was much easier to understand. Our carbon monocell was improved in this as well, and McLaren paid special attention to getting the exhaust more exciting for customers, as that was a huge part of the feedback. And of course, a Spider was available as well. Around this time, McLaren started another part of their story, which was the Sports Series with the 570, etc. But we will get onto that another day. More relevant and more interesting than that was the revival of the LT name, or Longtail. Not necessarily long-tailed in design, but the idea of a more track-focused, more aggressive McLaren started here, and some still consider the 675 LT to be one of their greatest cars. The 675 LT, as the name betrays, gave a bit of a power bump, which was not the important part. This car was 100 kg lighter than the equivalent 650S, okay? With its better aero, it produces 40% more downforce than that car. It had a more dynamic and responsive suspension. The gearbox was revised to have a shorter final drive ratio to give more vicious acceleration. And then to top it all off, those beautiful looks and a titanium exhaust system, making it at the time the best sounding car that McLaren had ever made. Truly pushing them then up to that area of super desirability from one of their cars, which I think was missing previously in the Super Series. And then the car that followed this, which is the most related to our car today, is of course the 720S. And that leaned heavily on the learning from those cars. Now for the 720, some key things were redone. First, we had carbon monocell 2 arrive, which was lighter and stiffer than the first one. We also have a whole new engine now, with a 4-litre V8 producing that much more power, of course, at 720 PS, which is very easy to guess. We had a new generation of their PCC suspension system with more advanced cross-linking now between the dampers. And then, of course, the aero strategy and the cooling strategy changed completely as well, with those revolutionary floating lights, or I always saw them as Deadpool eyes or Spider-Man squinting, and you'll probably never unsee that now. That's how it looks like to me. But a revolutionary look, no doubt, in terms of the way they look and indeed the cooling it gives. You had those double dihedral doors as well, with the cooling built in between them. Something that you'll not really see on any other car on the road. It's quite stunning and flows into our 750S. So pretty much improved in every area versus the 650. Though versus the LT, most agreed that it didn't have that maniacal, visceral enjoyment in every speed range. With the 720, you'd have to drive it and push it much harder, whereas the 675 could be enjoyed in lower speeds a lot more as well. During this time, McLaren brought on another aero hero, probably their most famous one, the aptly named Senna, a car that they would learn so much from and that we would all learn so much from in terms of what's capable for an aerodynamic car design. That would then even flow into cars like the 750 today. We can get some options from the Senna. But moving back to 720, the LT obviously came in and fixed some of those complaints, and it did it with the usual formula. 80 kg lighter than the 720, a more dynamic and advanced suspension system with more rigidity, but still maintaining some of that daily usability. We of course have the titanium exhaust system, we have more downforce, and it wound up in a gorgeous looking package that many consider to be their best car since the P1. And it's really hard to argue that fact, because it is an absolutely stunning beast. Following on from this, then finally, our car today, a car that seeks to retain some of the daily usability that made the 720S really unique in the space, but then bring on some of that visceral anger that the LT gave its customers. The type of emotion that would draw you back to the car. That was the goal of the 750S. It was all about engagement. With the 750, it feels like they've cheated a bit. Like they've used that LT formula for the first time now in a Super Series car to give it that added desirability. 30% of the components, even though the car looks so similar, are actually different. So a lot of that sounding like the LT cars. Let's talk about exactly what they've done. Start with the engine, okay, the 4-litre. It's actually got the lightweight pistons from the 765. The turbos have also been upgraded in a way that they require less boost pressure because the moving components move more freely when power is called upon. Then we have a new lighter stainless steel exhaust system that just sounds incredible, but is also positioned higher in order to do that, so it screams a bit louder and you have less of that low vibration sound. So a bit more F1, I think. And in typical LT formula, the gearbox has shorter final drive ratios for those quicker, more vicious gear changes. The front track is wider and the steering rack is a quicker one, again inspired by the LT. And we've got version 3 of the PCC suspension, which has been so awesome in the past, now with twin valve dampers that are able to act independently, threatening to make this even more capable in terms of both comfort and dynamics than cars in the past. McLaren, in that sense, have also made the front springs a bit softer and the rear springs a bit more stiff. Brakes are carbon, of course, as standard as before, but you can get the full Senna braking system to be used on track if you want as well. And indeed, you can even get a similar version of the carbon bucket seats inside the car. Then you come to aero and design, which is, on the face of it, looks very similar, but that's what we're here at RBR for, to show you the differences between this and the 720. So our eyes, even though they look the same, they're actually narrower. Our front splitter has actually been redesigned as well, but that doesn't mean you're getting less cooling, because the openings and the apertures are actually larger in this to get air into those radiators. Now, even though everything on the car is done for a purpose, what I love about it is how there's the McLaren shapes everywhere. There's Kiwi shapes everywhere as well, if you've got that keen eye. And the fact that there's so much brand identity, I love. And you'll see those little Easter eggs, not just outside the car, but inside as well. The rear, I love the rear diffuser, how you can see down and view the gearbox through the holes there. It's so motorsport. The Spider also has glazed flying buttresses for aero and to help with rear visibility. And who can forget, of course, that lighted engine bay, which just looks incredible at night, paired with our massive rear wing, which has got 20% more surface area, and then that cut in the middle for better visibility. Again, the wing looking much more LT than ever before. You can go absolutely wild with carbon options as well. Gloss carbon, matte carbon, you've got that forged style around the monocelle as well that you will see, very visible, just like a race car. We've got the lightest wheels that we've ever had on a road car here from McLaren. They're around about 13 kg lighter, which again helps all of this. And the cool thing is, this being a Spider, there is absolutely no difference in terms of the bracing used here versus the coupe. It's barely 40 kg heavier, and thanks to the carbon monocelle too, it's just as rigid as the coupe version. So the design never disappoints. It is honestly a showstopper. So lots of changes in big areas made to this car, incrementally making what was already a pretty amazing series better. But as I said, more interesting to me is how they use the LT formula to make this car hopefully even more of an emotional experience to own than any other standard Super Series car till now. Now there's some really important changes on the inside as well, including one really basic one that honestly they should have done years ago. Now you've got a manual door handle hidden within the inside of the door here. Lift it up, and using the doors is as eventful as you imagine. It never gets old. They're really easy to use, really, they don't take up much space in order to open as well. Give it a good pull down here, and you're immediately on notice that you're in a very special car indeed. In fact, to me, looking at it, it feels like it's more on the side of a race car that just happens to have been modified for road use rather than the other way around. The screens look very small and occasional, almost kind of like you see in a concept car for this type of car. Now, one of the big changes from 720S in here is that folding display in front that was a lot larger, and instead we've got a small, more motorsport-like display encased in the carbon, and that moves along with the wheel to give you better visibility. Also interesting is you get the Artura selection rockers here at the top. Your right one for your performance modes for your engine, so comfort, sport and track, and then your left one for handling, and you've got ESC in there as well, manual on the other side. And it may look odd to you at first, but when you're driving at the speed that you do in this car, it's quite handy to have them very close to the steering wheel. So that's new, I like that. Within the driver zone, depending on what mode you're in, it'll change the look of the mode to suit that mode. So comfort is a bit different to sport, which is a bit different to track. So a bit similar to the previous cars. Now the center here is very familiar McLaren. So you've got your vertical screen, but the great thing is now finally, even though it's wired, you've got Apple CarPlay in here. I can't believe this is the first McLaren to have it. They finally conceded to that. So you've got it in here, even though it's wired, it's still fine. No sign of Android Auto yet, but hey, we're making progress in the right direction. And in fact, this screen is a lot more responsive compared to the past ones. So no lag here, it works really quite well. The settings are very easy to find as well. What was less easy to find for me was basic things like controlling the wing mirrors on the side here, which was hidden right down here. It took me like 3 or 4 days to find that. And none of the AIs knew where to find it either. Your other controls here have been updated as well. Here we've got a button for aero, which obviously controls the rear wing. We've got this Kiwi button here, which saves your favorite modes in terms of handling and the engine, etc. So tap on the old Kiwi, nice nod to Bruce there, which we like. Then you've got the launch control there. Your little wheel here to control everything on screen is shaped like the MTC building, which is quite nice. And of course you've got your orange start stop button, then drive, neutral and reverse in the middle here. Got your roof controls down here, which can control the window behind as well, which is great to bring more engine noise when you don't want to bring the entirety of the roof off. And now we have a front lift system that operates so much faster than it did in the past. Just 4 seconds to go up or come back down. And again, I found that really useful when I've been using this in urban environments and other areas. So in terms of storage, obviously we have the front, lots of space. If you have the roof up, you've got a bit more space just behind that as well. Obviously this is a supercar, so not massive on that element, but not too bad either. No buttons on the steering wheel, as has always been the case with McLarens. I like that pure motorsport kind of approach that they took to this, so I'm not opposed to that. It makes the car feel more special, being more stripped out. One thing that I've absolutely hated though, and it's a point of ergonomics here, is when you go into the reverse mode, although you have the 360-degree camera, which is great for a wide supercar like this, your reversing camera is within your driver display here. So when you're going full lock and you're trying to see what's behind you, you kind of can't. I prefer if you had an additional view of the rear here as well, so you could see, see it on both screens. So that's been a bit of a bugbear. But apart from that, I'm really glad it has the 360 camera, because supercars, you always get worried with curbing, etc. And then that final party trick, the ability to change that photochromatic roof on the top, which again, useful when you have the roof up. And the roof, as we said, 11 seconds, up or down, easy peasy. So essentially the 750S takes the 720, blends in core performance parts from the 765 LT while making a more vicious car that still maintains that daily usability in a standard Super Series McLaren. And of course the 750S, a pure combustion car, unapologetic in that sense, and quite the difference then to the new Sport Series car, which is the Artura, which of course comes with the hybrid assisted V6 with the axial flux motor in there, the battery with a number of electric miles available as well. A totally different scenario to our pure combustion Super Series car here right now. And of course we now have a new halo car to sit at the top in McLaren's W1, this time using a V8 paired to the electrical system in what looks to be another member of an all-new trinity going forward. But to me, I'm really fascinated to see if and when they do an LT of the 750, what will that be like? But this is, I think, the first Super Series car where I'm thinking, you know what, this drives in such an exciting and emotional way and encroaches on that LT territory so much. Do you even need that car? Because I've just been unable to stop driving it. It is a seriously addictive and fun car to drive. Let me show you now. Start driving this car and it's in comfort mode, it does not betray, even in the slightest, the madness that's just about to come. I mean, look how quiet it is, almost bordering on borderline boring. And then the suspension feels very alien to this racing first cabin because it's so damn comfortable. The lift system's so easy to use, the steering's nice and light when you're driving like this, the visibility, pretty damn fantastic for a supercar. It's just so easy to drive. But don't be fooled, because this is just a mask, a deliberate disguise, because all it takes is one click of the drive controller here to then unmask. The true nature of this British built beast. This car is insane! This is by far and away the fastest car that I've driven on any normal road. It is unhinged! That scary turbo delay in power, the incredibly engaging chassis, and a soundtrack that stirs the soul. This is McLaren. How do I even begin to explain this car to you guys? Well, first of all, the manual gear changes in sport mode are vicious. They're like a punch in the back. In that way, it feels so angry and analog and so motorsport. The last car I drove like this, with these type of gear shifts, was the £3 million AMG 1 hypercar that of course is F1 derived. And F1, I think, is the right comparison to make for this car. 750 PS hurtling a body that's less than 1300 kg down the road is not normal. It's akin to attaching rocket boosters to a propeller plane and aiming for the moon. But you know what? In F1 it is normal. Those cars are 800 kg, producing up to 1000 horsepower. Yeah, as if by magic, they have all the control, all the grip, and all the deployability of that power. And that's exactly what this car feels like. The speeds get to frightening levels very, very quickly, but it's also exciting that it's that frightening. I think you want some of that Widowmaker personality in a car like this. Now, when it comes to pure speed off launch of a straight line, it's probably not as exciting as you might assume. So we got 3 seconds 0 to 60. Now we've tested a lot of cars faster than that, even humble things like the M4 convertible X-Drive. Off the line speed is not what this car is about, and it's the only metric where I think it would ever lose to anything else. And because in every other speed and gear it is simply too fast for any normal road, believe me. Now while yes, it has that boosty power delivery nature of something like a 2RS, it's the only thing that comes to mind right now, but equally if you calm down a little bit and you give some little throttle inputs, it doesn't hurtle you down the road. It's actually quite clever, and that becomes quite useful for making some nice sound as well. Oh, the sound, my God. Gearbox, as discussed, very motorsport, very quick to react. If you don't want the thud of the sport mode, you can go then directly into track. The car becomes not as loud, and the gearbox becomes much more clinical and doesn't unsettle the car when it shifts, so much better for track driving all round. Going into sport handling mode, and the handling is incredible, as you can imagine. The steering is some of the best I've ever experienced, I think. It's very pointy, it feels more heavy than McLaren's in the past. But also so fun and so quick to react as well. Where things get worse for most cars when you go from turn to turn, this car kind of digs in and relishes it. And then what you really begin to feel is the weight or the lack of it. And that's especially important now for this car, particularly because the rivals in the 296 and the Temerario, both hybrids, both heavy. And I think you're really going to feel that back-to-back versus this. And predictably, things get even better when the roof comes off in terms of emotion and accessing some of this incredible V8 sound. The exhaust is higher up, so you get more of that F1-like scream, which is great, but it's still deep. You get so many burbles, so many pops. Sadly, the microphone is never going to be good enough to pick up any of that. But boy, does it sound, like I said, soul-stirringly good. It sounds so much better than any Super Series car before it. But the nice thing is, it's not just in high speed with that scream, it's also if you calm down and you go into just lower speeds, there's wonderful burbles and pops and overruns and that deepness of a great V8. This is a wonderful 4-litre V8 engine. But then calming things down in comfort mode, it's like petting a good animal, isn't it? Good boy, well done, good boy. This PCC suspension, 3rd generation, is insane. It's even more comfortable than my GT3 Touring, which is so bizarre to say. When you look at the two of them, you'd think the hardcore one would be worse, but it's so good at dealing with some of these awful bumps. And while comparing it to a sports car is fine, I think it's more comfortable than most compact class cars that I've driven, and maybe even some mid-range luxury cars. That's how insane the suspension is. Probably not as comfortable as what I remember from 720, but pretty damn close considering how dynamic this is. The other thing that just surprised me hugely in living with this car was the sheer adoration that people give this car. You're going down a street and it's a smile, a nod, a gaping mouth. And it's just such a cool thing to experience because I've had some of the rivals and it's always hit or miss with Ferrari or Lambo. And a Porsche can drive by almost undetected. This, for reasons that should be obvious, just makes everyone smile. And it's not just outside. Inside my own house as well, my family are very used to performance cars coming for testing and hardly blink an eye at anything. Currently, I have a queue at home that they are fighting at which person is going to get the first ride in the 750S. And that says a lot. And what is supercar ownership if not bringing joy not just to yourself but to others as well? Now, while this does the job of a supercar in terms of head-turning sleek looks and crazy speeds, it's also a bit of a track monster. Last year, Evo put it up against the GT3 RS at Anglesey Circuit, and this 750S came out marginally quicker than that car, which has got 4 times the downforce of this and is, you know, a for-purpose track monster. So it can wear that hat if it needs to, and considering that they're a similar price, it's very good that it can. And in my own personal supercar experience, I found it less frightening and intimidating than, say, my GT Black Series, which is a 730 horsepower rear-wheel driven track monster. With this, the power feels more deployable to me in normal scenarios. The body seems a bit more predictable. It's more enjoyable, I think, to drive in normal speeds than that car was. Though I will say that this is a car that is unhappy on normal roads. It wants to be revved out, it wants to be driven fast, and I think 70% of that experience is somewhere hidden away here. It's also incredible to me how vastly the MPG can vary. So I can easily average something like 25 to 26 MPG on a motorway in this car without even trying. But if I go into sport mode and I drive like I am now, you will see the fuel bar dropping physically. It's crazy. It'll go from, like, literally, I've seen it happen with the same fuel, 250 miles down to like 50 or 60. And it will do both of those depending on how you're driving. And in that way, this car is so motorsport, because just like a race car, it will dump and use all the fuel that it needs to in order to be the best race car possible. But then it has that strange Jekyll and Hyde other side of it where it can be the normal car as well. I've filled this car up fully twice now, and I've barely done like 200 miles. That's how crazy the fuel consumption is. It's crazy, but it confirms to me my feeling that this is just a race car that happens to be usable on the road. Now, if you're considering a car like this, at the moment 720S you can get for like 100k less than what list was. And it's reached that kind of sweet spot where I don't think you'll lose much on it, so that's going to be a really good option for a lot of people. And at the risk of saying the obvious, this 750S, it merges the best parts of the 720S and the 765LT into their best Super Series car that does the best of both for daily usable supercar needs. But more crucially to me, it is still a pure combustion V8. And it's beautifully simple in that regard. No battery, no electric motor, no silly systems just waiting to go wrong. No agenda. Just a gearbox, an engine, a beautiful car, and a pilot who's got a massive smile on his face. And to me, supercar ownership doesn't get any better than that. See you guys next time.